It's my native duty to get outside. So, um, but yeah, man, before we get into your life and world of education, I want to know first and foremost, probably one of the most momentous things that happened in education in the last century, easy, has been this pandemic. So 4 years ago, we were trying to figure out how we were going to get through it, how things were going to be affected. How did you get through it, and how did it change the way that you do things now?
So I'm not currently in education anymore. So
Okay.
I'm no longer in the classroom. I spent 5 years in the classroom and I left actually right before the pandemic, which I'm really grateful for
Yeah.
because I realized that teaching was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life.
Yeah.
I got into teaching because I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to help people. And I thought that if you can help kids, that's the best way to help people because they can learn from their mistakes, they can grow, they don't have to make all the same mistakes I did. But I also realized that the classroom wasn't for me, right? So I learned that I really liked breaking down complex topics into simple step by step solutions. Learned that I really liked crafting content and making things simple and easy to understand, but I didn't like controlling behavior. And I didn't like the variety of factors, even in amazing schools with supportive administration and one to one technology and small class sizes. It is still infinitely hard. And I also realized that there was not a lot of room for advancement within the education system. It's just kind of how long you're there. You just kind of have to be around. And it's not about the impact that you make on the kids. It's not about how kids are doing emotionally or socially. It still comes down to test scores and what can be quantified. And so, right before the pandemic, I actually left the classroom to start my own company.
So let's go into that, what you're doing right now. I'm gonna put you back in the classroom, but it's career day and they're third graders. And one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them right now?
Well, now I am a mental health communicator. I'm also a podcast host. So I think a really quick way to make anyone disinterested in what you're talking about is to say that you're in marketing. If you tell anyone you're in marketing, their eyes
You're
will
right.
immediately glaze over and they will completely just tune out. But what I do is I am a mental health communicator. So I work with Sandstone Care, which does teen and young adult mental health and substance use treatment because I still wanted to help kids and I just wanted to help them in a way that I felt like was in line with my skill set. And so I do YouTube videos and animations and podcasts, and we create web pages and blog posts. And we do a lot of things to help make mental health education accessible to each and every person, whether it's parents who are worried about whether or not their kid's doing all right, or it's teens or young adults trying to figure out this next transition in their life. So I'm still a part of that change that happens in those teen and young adult years. I'm just coming at it from a mental health perspective and from a content perspective.
Which is so necessary, and that's an outgrowth of living through this pandemic. So, what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream?
I think in the third grade, I really wanted to be an animator. I loved cartoons, I loved drawing, and I loved art. And so that was the way to kind of make me happy. And I quickly realized that that was not something that I saw like a career path with. Nobody I knew was an artist and felt like good about their life. Nobody I knew had showed me that kind of blueprint for how to do that.
Yeah.
And really, in third grade, I was just trying to survive. I came from a family with a lot of addiction. So both of my parents are addicts, um, alcohol and meth. And so I grew up in a really chaotic home. And so for me, third grade, it was like getting to fourth grade, was getting to fifth grade. And I was just trying to be happy, to have friends, and to make it throughout the day without getting detention or put in time out. Because school, as a kid, even though I really enjoyed it, it was really hard for me. I didn't learn all of those social skills that I feel like a lot of kids get when they have really consistent, stable families. For me, that stuff wasn't there. And so I was constantly bucking against the system in the regards that like I wasn't a good student, so to speak. I wasn't good at playing with others. I wasn't good at following directions. I wasn't good at doing my assignments or being organized. And so as a third grader, I think I was just trying to become a fourth grader.
Yeah. So how did you evolve into this point where you have the heart and capacity to be an educator and to help the youth with mental, health issues that are stymieing that age group? How did this all evolve into who you are today?
I'd be curious to hear what but before I go into that, could you tell me what did you want to do when you were in the third grade?
So I was being a Kansas City kid, I would watch Chips as a kid and see that LA
Mm.
sunshine splashed all over everything. And I'm like, I want to ride with Poncho up there. And then I I saw Cops on Fox and saw what it was like, and I was like, I think I'm okay. I'm good.
Maybe not. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
gonna detour from there. But I don't think anything really made sense to me until I really got into sports and I wanted to get into broadcasting. So what I do now is ultimately what I always envisioned that I would get into. So
So you were
it's
living your dream then.
absolutely every day. And that's the reason why this is so much fun. Like running into cats like you, there's so many people in this world that are doing good. And I think coming from a mental health perspective, I still can't believe because I've been doing podcasting for so long. I still can't believe it's a big thing now. The pandemic really blew it up, but I think it's a modern version of therapy. I think it proves that we are all much more alike than we aren't. There's this political divide that is thrown in our face all the time, but I think we all are going towards the same things. And I think we can all help each other. And through that pandemic, we realized we need human contact more than ever.
Yeah, I mean, that really ties into like what made the difference in my life. It's relationships. One of the unique things about podcasting is that you're sitting and you're talking with someone and you're looking at their face for 30 minutes to an hour and you're having a human conversation, even if it's over technology, right?
Mhm.
But the point is that I'm not distracted trying to do something else. I am not trying to sell anything. I'm not trying to multitask. I'm really just trying to connect with another human,
Yep.
oftentimes learning and getting better at asking questions and
Hmm.
figuring out what makes somebody tick.
Yeah.
And so for me, what made a huge difference in my life, how did I go from a kid who, was not really good at regulating their emotions and was dysfunctional and often in trouble? How did I go from that to being like yourself, a happy human being who's been married for 14 years and, you know, if today is the last day on earth, I'm really happy. Like I've known love, I've had success, like I feel more than blessed, right? How did that happen? It came through relationships and people stepping into my life and being a positive influence, sometimes for a short amount of time, sometimes for a longer period of time. But those people made all the difference. When I was 13, I knew that my home environment wasn't the way other home environments are, right? You go and you do a sleepover at a friend's house and you're like, yo, this family's way different than my family. You don't know how bad your situation is until you have something to compare it to. It's all relative. Everyone thinks that their childhood's pretty good until they realize, like, oh man, there's some stuff that maybe isn't normal here, right? So I watched things on TV. I went over to my friends' houses and I realized, yo, like this drug use stuff, like this hyper independence stuff, this is not the way that I'm supposed to be living. No one ever asked me, my homework. No one ever asked me, how you're doing at the end of the day. Nobody's waking me up for school. Nobody's giving me, there's a lot of security that just wasn't there for me. And so when I was 13, a friend's family was like, hey, do you want to come live with us? And I was like, hell yeah, I want to live with you. And they're like, well, we'll let you come live with us, but your parents have to sign over guardianship. And how do you tell your parents as a 13-year-old that they need to give you up because it's what's best for you? It was a hard conversation,
Yeah.
but I did it as a 13-year-old. I talked to my parents and be like, look, guys, not here to blame y'all, but things haven't been great. I have a better opportunity over here, but we have to go down to the courthouse and you have to sign over guardianship in order for this family to let me live with them. And they did. To my parents' credit, they did. They signed over guardianship. I went and lived with this family. they realized that I was a lot more to handle than they thought. And after a year, they rescinded their guardianship.
Wow.
And another family, who was a family friend, took me in. But the point is, even for that short amount of time, with the different families that I stayed with throughout high school, essentially kind of entering into that foster care system, um, they had a huge impact on me, right? They showed me consistency and love. And they showed me, like, they made me come to terms with how my actions were impacting people. And like, it was, it was unequivocally, it was the determining factor. Someone taking an interest in a kid and
Yeah.
being able to say, hey, I want to help develop this kid and pour my love into this kid, even though they're not my blood. It made all the difference for me.
Wow.
And so much of what we're trying to do now is to build those relationships within families, to build the communication skills within parents to their kids, so that they can also help develop and grow to be healthy, happy adults.
Talk about living your dream, taking what you lived through and making it a positive and rippling that out into the world. That's wonderful. So I'm curious, during all of these phases of your life leading up to now, who's been that hero, that inspiration that's fueled what you do?
So honestly, I would say that person is my wife. So I got married when I was 21
Hmm.
and my wife was 19. And when you get married that young, usually it's a recipe for disaster. You don't know what you're doing. Like, I think about who I was at 21. That was such a long time ago. I didn't know anything, didn't know how to be a husband, didn't even know how to be a human, really. Right. But I had been through therapy. I'd had enough people pour into me that I was trying to like make this happen. But my wife, we learned how to change together. We learned how to set boundaries to help each other become better. And when you're married for some to somebody long enough, you change together. And so you realize you can't hold on to the idea of who somebody was when they were 19. You can't say, "Oh, you used to be like this, but now you're not like this." You can't do that.
Yeah.
And so we learned how to regulate our emotions. We learned how to cope with stress together, and we were there for each other. We both had family situations where we knew what we didn't want in a relationship, and so we were able to come to the table at least with that. And that person has made me a better human being over and over and over again, right? Like, I do not think I would be the happy person I am today if I didn't have her love every single day, that walking this earth, that's been a huge deal. What about you?
So,
Who's that person for you, by the way?
what's weird about this? There's been a lot of people that have been very influential in my life. And when you talk about seeing a family operate on a very healthy level, I saw that when I was like in my early 20s. And I was like,
Mm,
wow, that's amazing. This family,
early 20s, you
yeah.
saw this. Okay.
Yeah, I saw that one of my best friends of all time, one of the reasons why I got into jazz radio and love jazz. Yeah, he had four brothers and their parents were very involved. They were marriage counselors. Dad was a business owner, mom was an artist, and I just saw all of this love and all of these things that were a part of their existence. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. And then I saw it with other friends. It was when I got older, but it's funny, when I was a kid, I loved Dwight Gooden, the pitcher for the New York Mets. He was my hero. I loved him. So last year in September, I found out that he was coming to Kansas City. We have the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, and he was getting honored in something called Hall of Game. So it's all of these black players that have had extraordinary success in their careers. So he's
Mm,
coming in. So as an independent journalist, I hopped on and said, "Can I get press passes?" And long story short, earlier that day, my son's special needs, we did this program called Challenge Air where they take special needs kids and fly them around Kansas City. So there was all
wow.
this construction going on, and I knew this was happening. And we end up giving it a try, and we go and we get in there, and all of a sudden, Doc comes around the corner and he sees people, and he just came right up to me. He said, I'm Dwight Gooden. I said, "My name's Joe. It's so great to meet you." And we ended up interviewing, and he is a wonderful human being. They say don't meet your heroes, but Doc was such a cool cat. It was So cool. I still can't believe it happened. And after it happened, I came out and my son eviscerates on things. So I had to be careful about telling him what was going on. But when I came out, I had tears in my eyes and he said, "What's the matter?" I said, "I just met my hero." And
Mm,
I explained to him how it all came about. And I said, "What do you think about that?" And he said, "I think he's my hero now too." So it was cool,
mm.
you know. But anyway, that was mine.
So you had this family when you were in your 20s. They got you into jazz. How did that connect with your baseball hero?
Well, when I was a kid, I was really into sports. I loved sports. And and Dwight Gooden was kind of in that early part of my life. I collected baseball cards and everybody I was around, we did sports. And Doc was just the guy I gravitated to. I loved his story and he was redemptive because he had drug problems and got out of it. He was just a real guy to me. And the first time I ever wrote an article to or a letter to the Kansas City Star, that's what I used to get my foot in the door in college to get my first writing gig as a sports writer.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of things that kind of went through that. But jazz was later on. When I got into my 20s, I never heard jazz. And a friend of mine gave me Kind of Blue, and I was flying to Seattle, and I had the old uh, CD player, and I was like, "Wow, this is like I've never heard this before." So all of that was kind of a different phase of my life. But
Hmm.
yeah, so
You brought up an interesting point. It's you connected with his story, right? Like this
yeah,
is like the story of this guy made him your guy, right?
yeah,
And it brings up a really interesting point. When we think about developmental psychology, we only learn how to regulate our emotions through other people.
yeah,
It's not something you can figure out by yourself. We come into this world and we can do three things: we can connect, we can fight or flight, or we can freeze and dissociate. And dissociate just means to push down, to compartmentalize, right? But we come into this world being able to connect. And the only way you learn how to handle your emotions, how to handle heartbreak and setback and challenges is through seeing other people in your life experience those things and do it in a positive or a negative way,
yeah,
right? They call it a maladaptive or a positive coping mechanism.
yeah,
And so your ability to interact with human beings who are able to demonstrate positive ways of dealing with challenges and stress ultimately determines your early ability to do the same.
yeah,
And so if you have a parent who gets angry when stuff doesn't go their way, then you get angry. And if you have a parent who is internal and retreats and doesn't talk to people when they feel stressed, then that's something that you learn how to do. Because as a baby, we have what's called mirroring neurons, right? This means that when a parent is looking at you and they smile, you smile, right? And when they look distressed, you feel distressed. And this even goes onto the chemical level. If a parent is depressed and their breathing is shallow and their heartbeat is irregular and they're holding this baby to their chest, the baby picks up on all of that. There's
hmm,
tons of research to show this, that we are coming into this world as sponges. And the only way that we change for the better when it comes to these types of positive coping mechanisms or being able to regulate our emotions or co regulate with other human beings is through experiencing people like this figure in your life who you saw overcome adversity in a positive way, to
yep,
seeing a family to love each other and how they interact with each other, the ways that they channel that love into things like jazz and to music and positive things. That's only something that we can learn from other human beings.
yeah,
And so, there's like a narrative as Americans that we have that with this bootstrap mentality that you kind of have to, not cry and push it down and to, grind until you make it kind of thing. But really, our success is always been tied to the community and to the people who are willing to invest into love into other people and to
yeah.
teach them these things.
For sure. So what has been consistent for you in your life and your work? But you have to give a lot of yourself to help people, but you also have to retain to take care of yourself and your relationships and your marriage. What is that for you every day? What's your motivation?
I think about right now that if you wanted to go and buy basketball shoes, you would have some brands in mind, right? You'd be like, okay, like I could get Nikes, I could get, Jordans, I could get Adidas. There's like things that you feel like you have options for. And for a lot of problems in life, there are those things. But if I'm a parent, and as a parent with, special needs, like, or who's on the autism spectrum, you get this. It is not crystal clear what to do next when you realize that you have a kid who's struggling. You don't have an option. You're not thinking, oh, I could go here or here or here. No, you're lost, right? That's not in our human psyche. Why is it that we know brands like this that are so acceptable for sports, but when it comes to like the emotions and humanity of the people in our lives and our family, we don't know who to turn to, right? And so for me, my mission is to help make that a little bit more accessible. If you have a teen or if you have a young adult who's struggling with depression or trauma or anxiety, or if they're addicted to substances, you're embarrassed, right? I want you to know who to turn to. I want you to have an option. I want you to have a place to go to where you don't feel judged, to where you feel like you can make a difference and you can start working on getting better and healing as a family. And if you're a young adult and you're what some people would call like that failure to launch, right? Like you didn't go to college, you haven't moved out of the parents' house, you haven't had a chance to be able to figure out who you are. Maybe you were a part of the generation who finished out your schooling career during the pandemic. And those key social relationships and those key events that happen for transitions in our lives just weren't a part of your everyday. And so now you feel kind of stuck. You don't have a job or you have a job you don't love. You are spending more and more time doing stuff that gives you a sense of satisfaction, but it doesn't really push your life along. You don't have significant long-term relationships and friendships. And there's so many people like that. And so now my mission, the thing that keeps me going is to be able to provide that kind of access to care for folks and so that people to communicate it, to talk about it in places like this, that there's an option, that there are places that are specifically designed to help and support you so that you don't have to do this thing alone.
So you've been through so much in your life up to this point. And at the end of the day, what are you the proudest of?
Um, it's a great question. I am the most proud of being married. It sounds really cheesy, I was talking about my wife earlier, but at the end of the day, your wife or your spouse, your partner, they know you. They know all of your flaws and insecurities and the things that are challenging. And if you can stick it out with them, if you can grow together, that's an amazing thing,
Mhm.
right? Um, and so for me, like the friendships and relationships that I have, nobody comes into this world or leaves this world thinking about the money that they've made and the career success they've had, their job title, the amount of followers they have on Instagram. The things that really matter are the relationships that they build with people along the way and the impact that they're able to have on other people, right? I don't have kids. I'm probably never going to have kids. That's just not us. That's not within our family dynamic. But what makes me happy is knowing that I'm building good, solid friendships, that I have love with my wife, that I love my family, and then I'm able to help people.
Yeah,
And so for me, like I feel like I've already won. If
yeah.
if I never get another day and I never have another opportunity to do anything, I feel like I've already lived a very happy and blessed life, and I'm okay with that.
So if you ran into that young version of you, that kind of teenage version of you trying to figure out this reality, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice, it's a dream sequence. Based on the wisdom you've gained in your life so far, what advice would you give that young version of you?
Mm. So on my desk, I keep a picture of myself and my family when we were at like really a really happy stage,
Yeah.
right? And like I'm here, I'm the youngest, and I'm like smiling. And so I think it's easy to look at a chaotic life or a chaotic world and think your family is not perfect and they're the reason why your life is bad or your circumstances are not perfect. And I'm a white dude living in the United States. And so, like, my amount of privilege is pretty high. And the things that I was able to do may not have been as easy for other folks in the same situation, given if they were a female or if they were a different race or any of these things, right? But bringing it all together is that everybody is out here doing the best that they can, and you have to forgive people.
Hmm.
You have to forgive yourself, and you have to forgive other people in order to be able to grow, right? I spent a lot of time in my life thinking about the negative habits that I had and the ways that I handled stress. And, I cheated on significant partners in past relationships, and I would sabotage and I would be inconsistent. And I would really blame a lot of that on my upbringing, right? I'd be like, oh, like, I didn't have these role models. And to some degree, that's true. But the thing that I hold most dearly now is one, forgiving myself, right? Because I couldn't forgive other people until I forgave myself and saying, hey, you were just a kid trying to do your best,
Hmm.
right? And then two, being able to forgive others. When we don't hold forgiveness in our hearts, right? It's like a poison that we feel like it actually hurts other people, but it just hurts ourselves,
Yeah.
right? And so having self compassion allowed me to be able to have compassion for other people and unlock this whole other part of my personality that allows me to be the person I am today.
Yeah.
And so, like, now being able to talk about mental health, it came through first forgiving myself, forgiving others, because nobody's perfect. Parents are just trying to do the best they can. They're parenting the way that they were parented, you know? And then once you've done those two things, going and loving other people, because we need more people who are compassionate and secure in themselves to share that love. We need more examples of the family that you experienced in your 20s
Yeah.
and that figure, the baseball figure who's a significant person in your life. We need more of that.
Yeah.
Part of what you do on this podcast is kind of exemplifying these situations, these examples that if they can do this, then I can do this too.
Yeah. So well said. So if anyone out there wants to reach out, they want to learn more about what you're doing, any of the good business in your world, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, the best place to go is sandstonecare.com. That's where we do most of our work. If you are hearing my voice and you're like, yo, I want to hear more of this person's voice, we have the Treatable podcast, which is basically every single week we break down another mental health challenge in simple everyday language with experts in the field to help people understand that what they're going through is real, that it's more common than they think, but most of all, that it's treatable. And then obviously I'm on all the social medias. So if you ever just type in my name, Clint Malley, Mally, into Google, you will see all the places where I show up.
This is great, Clint. Man, what great work you're doing. What a great message and story. Thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your time today in your world. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. I feel like I was able to, like, even just hearing a little bit of your story and hearing more of it. I wish there were more conversations like this. You're doing amazing work with this.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm amazed by how many wonderful humans are on this planet, just really genuinely putting the good out there. So keep doing it. And thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Best of luck with everything.